Mr. Miller, are you still here? Mr. Miller, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, sir, I'm gonna have you raise your right hand, repeat after me. Do you solemnly swear to or affirm that your testimony in these proceedings will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience who will be testifying here today?
I probably
Raise your Zoom hand.
I'll
Okay.
raise my Zoom hand.
Mr. Barris, is that you?
It is me.
Okay, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony of these proceedings will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the audience, raise your hand. Okay, great. That completes the swearing in. Next item on the agenda is communications and or correspondence. We do have an email today from Laura Krebs, who is not here today, obviously, which was sent to all of the ZBA members, but I'm sure not to the applicants here today. I'll read the first part of it. Unfortunately, due to illnesses in the office, Doug and I are not available to attend the ZBA meeting tonight. Doug will set up the Zoom meeting before he leaves the township this afternoon. Great job. Please forward the following case summary to the ZBA members for their consideration at tonight's meeting. The remainder of the email consists of 2 paragraphs, one for each of the items on the agenda here tonight. So I'll defer reading them at the moment. We'll read them when we call each matter. Does anybody else have any communications or correspondence? Okay, great. The next item on the agenda is the public hearings. The first hearing is variance number 22005, Andrew and Natalie Barris by Dan Miller for 4700 Stonehill Lane, H08-34-100-032 to allow an existing deck with a 36-foot rear yard deck setback rather than the required 40-foot rear yard deck setback pursuant to section 36-71, small b as in boy. The public hearing is now open. I just want to summarize for the benefit of the applicants how the matter will proceed. I will call on the petitioner or the petitioner's representative to present statements in support of the appeal along with any supporting evidence. The petitioner, her or his agent or attorney may present his or her case, including presenting witnesses on his or her behalf. Members of the ZBA shall report on their site inspection and any conversations with the petitioner they may have had. Then members of the public who support the petitioners speak and correspondence, if any, is read. Then members of the public who oppose the petitioner speak and correspondence is read. A rebuttal may be permitted the petitioner. During the presentations, members of the ZBA may ask certain questions of the applicants. After which, upon motion, the hearing will close. or the meeting will be, the public hearing will be continued to a specified date and time. At that point, the ZBA members deliberate amongst themselves and decide the issue, or if a majority of members decide more information or clarification is needed, the issue may be postponed to a future hearing. I may limit the time of speaking, but we'll defer any discussion of that until a little bit later. That's the general nature of the proceedings and how we will go along with this. At this point, for this public hearing, let me read you what Ms. Krebs sent us today in her email. 4700 Stonehill. The applicant is seeking a variance for the reduction of the required rear yard deck setback along the north property line from 40 feet to 36 feet. The deck has been constructed and is currently non-conforming. The applicant is concerned without a variance, it may be difficult to have other modifications on the site and may affect possible future sale of the property. We note a zoning compliance application was received and approved for the deck in 2005. However, the actual location of the home and deck on the site plan are different from the built location viewed via aerial photography. The zoning compliance approved the deck in a location that met the setback requirements. So at this time, I will allow the applicant to present the case. So either Mr. Miller or Mr. Barris, at your choice, go ahead and proceed.
I can mention just briefly that I moved into the house May of 2020 with my family. And to be honest with you, until Dan helped me out, I really wasn't aware of this. So I'm fortunate that Dan was able to advise me.
Okay,
but
when you, just for the record, when you say Dan, who are you referring to?
Dan Miller, who's the other person. And Dan, if you'd like to introduce yourself, you're welcome to.
Yeah, my name is Dan Miller, and I'm, like Andrew was saying, just helping him through, some of the process of some home improvement related items and things of that nature. And I offered to help with this when we did find out or did realize that what they have existing on site is non-compliant.
Okay, so that's how it came up. You whatever work you were doing, Mr. Miller, led you to conclude that there was a problem?
That's correct. Although it's really a matter of planning at this point, not necessarily work that was being done. It's really just a planning step when these things were,
Yeah, I'm not worried about that. I'm just trying to get a chronology of how it arose, how you people became aware of the problem.
Interestingly, this did not come up during the sale when I bought the house. Now, this was during COVID. I bought it in May of 2020. I don't know, but just the timing of the sale. This didn't come up with my attorney or with I'm blanking on it, but the person who was handled the transaction. Dan,
title company,
sorry. And I also discovered a couple unrelated to this expired permits that Dan's helped me take care of now that were back from 2014. We're taking care of those and we're working with Deb Schmidt. But we've had a couple surprises, which is okay. But we want to take care of these items. We don't want to just leave them out there. So Dan said, before we even consider making a pool in our backyard, let's just do the right things and make sure that these things are taken care of. So that's why we came to you for your advice.
Okay. All right, well, we're not here to even consider a pool by any means. So, but go ahead. And so you understand, it's the petitioner's burden of proof to show that they meet the criteria of a request for a variance. So it's really up to you, Mr. Barris, or Mr. Miller, to give us as much information as you can. We've gotten some of the information from Carlisle Wortman. I assume you've seen that summary some time ago.
Yep. Did a great job. Yep.
But first of all, is there anything else? And I guess I have some questions, and perhaps the other board members have questions as well of you. But go ahead and present anything else you'd like for us to hear before we go any further.
I don't have any, I don't know how this word's used, but exceptional or extraordinary circumstances per se. I will say though that until I learned of this, I really wasn't aware of any issues. I would say the only extraordinary thing might be is I think it could impact my house value potentially. It doesn't seem, and this is a very uneducated person, I don't do this as my day job, but it doesn't seem like a huge variance in terms of distance. So it's not a significant request. I don't know if that's true. I'm just guessing based on what I'm reading on the document. And currently the neighbor next to me is farm. I know that could change in the future, but currently the positioning of what we're talking about doesn't seem to really impact our neighbors. We live in a private, very private, there's only 7 homes in our little private area. It's a private neighborhood. So, we're pretty far out there. So our neighbor, I know it could be something in the future that's not a farm, but our neighbor owns a huge farm. He's been there for a very long time. And so, in my opinion, the variance is not super material, but again, I don't have, you guys have much more perspective than I do on the nature of this request. Dan, is there anything else? I wish I was better at this.
Well, let me ask you this, Mr. Barris. You've referred to a neighbor. I assume that's the neighbor who is to your, north?
Yes.
Right.
It's a farmer to the north. They have a house on the all the way on Knight Road, so not near our house. It's actually further to the main road.
No, so I understand. In fact,
okay,
I'll disclose that I went out there.
Oh, cool.
And looked at where the house and the deck is and where I understand the property line is. And I did see that particular neighbor would be the most one affected. Have you discussed this with him?
I have not, but I've worked with him on a couple other matters. He's been very flexible. He's been very generous. He's been there a long time.
Well, I'm sure he was given notice of this. I'm just asking whether he commented at all on this to you.
He hasn't. We brought up a separate issue with him that he helped us out with, and he was very generous with working with us on. So,
okay. Have you folks done any research on your own to try to figure out how this may have occurred?
No. Oh, Dan, do you want to go this one?
Well, I know going through what Andrew had mentioned, working with Deb Schmidt on some of the permitting, it sounds like there was approval for a decking area at their house. And I think just either upon construction or at some point, they just built beyond what they were approved for, is my understanding. And I guess that's...
Okay, that's based on what?
That's based on what was permitted at one point back in time.
Okay, but you guys haven't even looked at the documents yourselves, the zoning compliance papers or anything like that?
We have the one that was prepared for us by Carlisle Wortman.
Well, that was prepared to evaluate your variance request.
Yep.
I assume that's the one.
Yep.
Well, that one I just wanted to confirm the information that's in their report. They basically, Carlisle Wortman essentially said that back in 2005, the entire deck was approved.
Right.
That's your understanding as well?
It is before our time. Can I give you my opinion on what happened?
Well, well, you can, I suppose. We'll
Okay.
listen to it with a grain of salt. Go ahead.
This is a grain of salt. I found many other issues with the house that I've corrected. There was open permits that I've corrected or in the process of correcting.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. We had two open permits that Dan and I are closing out. One was for the barn. Deb Schmidt and I have been working on that one. And the second was for an addition they did in our house. Both of those were up to the final inspection, but they never closed it out. They for the one of the inspections, it was simply a closeout. And for the second one, I don't know the technical stuff, but there were a couple of things they didn't do. And basically I had the inspector come back and I did a couple of repair items and those items are being closed out now.
Okay.
So the prior owner who built the house was a general contractor himself. He did a lot of the work himself is what I've come to realize. And he was very sloppy. So
Well, okay. Yeah, I was trying to figure out myself how this possibly could have occurred, especially in light of a zoning compliance back in 2005. And the only stuff that I could come up with was off the governmental websites, and it basically says that there were inspections done and it was like taken care of. So, and this all went back to 2005 or thereabouts.
Yep.
I just was checking to see whether you had any further information.
we don't.
Okay. And I should note for the record that Carlisle Wortman in their report of November 10th, 2022 also refers to, sort of as a sidelight, that there was also a question of the barn being in compliance, but I've been advised that by Carlisle Wortman that is not correct, and that in fact the barn was not built within the setback. Is that your understanding as well?
Dan, you have more on that. We just finished a survey.
Yeah, and of course, I'm sorry. Some of that was I missed some of that.
Well, I just want to.
I can comment on that.
I just want to confirm there's no issue with the barn, and besides, it wouldn't necessarily have any effect on this hearing here.
Right.
But we're not deciding anything, because as far as I'm concerned, there is nothing to be decided.
Right. And just the background on the barn, it was built in 2004.
Yeah,
okay.
We really don't have to go into all the details because it's not directly an issue. I just wanted to confirm that we're aware that although there's a suggestion by Carlisle Wortman of an irregularity or a possible irregularity, in fact, there is none.
Correct. We agree with that.
Here today, so.
We agree with that.
Okay, anything else you'd like to present at this time?
Well, we obviously it's your decision to make. We ask for your discretion and grace and advisement on this. Obviously, we're coming in with good intentions. Dan wanted to make sure we did this as a planning thing before we did anything we're going to submit some plans for. So obviously you guys know this better than we do, but we really hope for your grace and the 4 feet or variance request. And you've heard our case. I wish I had something extraordinary, but this is what we have.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me see if any of the other commissioners have any questions. Mr. Shields, do you have any questions?
I was wondering if we did not grant the variance, would it be possible to cut back 5 feet of the deck, do something very nice with it, and then allow you to do the pool?
Well, Wait a minute.
Totally separate item.
Never mind.
Hold on.
Yeah.
The pool,
It's not a topic for
any
tonight.
pool, any change here is not involved. We're
I shouldn't have brought it up. I shouldn't have brought it up. I apologize.
And I should.
And the only reason I brought up the barn was to make sure that that was not misleading either. So forget the pool.
Forget, my
The
bad.
pond would be good for you. Okay.
I was thinking about the deck.
These people they're too young. They don't get my jokes. Did you get that? Did you get my joke?
I didn't get the joke. I didn't
Never
understand.
mind.
Okay,
You're too young, Mr. Barris.
that's fine. I accept that.
Anyway, Mr. Steels, go ahead. Do you have any other questions? Okay. Mr. Kangas, do you have any questions?
Well, I was just gonna follow up, not worrying about a pool, but being able to cut back on the deck. Is that the only alternative that you may have?
Is that a question to us?
If in fact, I think to restate it, if in fact we deny your request for a variance, what would be your options at that point?
I don't know. It may be difficult. If you saw the deck, the system that's in place there, it might be somewhat materially expensive for me.
Very. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Dan. You might have better knowledge on this than I do.
I just was going to say, I think it would be very cost prohibitive and somewhat unrealistic, I think, to take that small portion away from what's constructed based on the existing grades and other things there and the way the deck is configured.
Yeah, just so the record is clear, the deck is actually raised above the surface of the ground by some formidable wood, if I remember correctly.
In concrete, yeah. It's in there. It's pretty deep, I'm assuming.
And to take 4 feet off of that in order to comply, quite apart from what it would look like.
Plus the trellis system above it would
be a real problem.
It'd be a serious issue for me. Yes, I don't think I'd be able to do it.
All right, Mr. Welch.
Just to be clear, I did visit the site back in November when this first came in.
Oh, great.
I guess my question for you is, in your discussions moving forward, are you looking to do anything in the footprint of the deck, or is this just to get the deck covered and your planning items, should they infringe on the setback, would be a future discussion?
Dan, you want to comment on that? I think the answer is yes, but.
Yeah, I think with what we've discussed conceptually as far as planning is concerned, there's really not anything that we would be outside of the setbacks with. It's just a matter of this particular item.
Okay.
As we're doing planning, we're like, let's see if we can correct this or try to, go through the steps necessary to be compliant and see if we can.
Okay.
Because it's just not compliant, and it's just a way of kind of cleaning up the open-ended items on this property to begin with before we start into something else.
Yep.
Well, just to confound matters a little bit, and I'll get cleared up by the chair. The parking pad outside your garage, at least from the document shown, might also infringe on the setback, but we'll leave that for a different.
Well, it has been brought up by Carlisle Wortman, number 1. Number 2, I'm not sure it is.
But anyway.
I'm doing this from memory. I didn't see it as an issue. So
No, I'm just looking at the, but no, I don't have any more questions.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, it was your turn.
Oh, great.
I was
Just
not
didn't
going
want
to
you to
forget
forget
you,
me.
Ms. Gulberson. I know you're back there working on the Zoom.
And I just wanted to, one of the issues was the concern about being able to expand the house. And I just wanted to draw people's attention to section 36-400 of our zoning ordinance, and it's titled non-conforming structures. And if you go to section D2, it does specifically say that a single-family detached residential dwelling unit and accessory buildings may be expanded if approved by the zoning official subject to the following requirements. One, the single-family residence shall be a permitted use in the district in which it is located, and the expansion shall meet all yard requirements of the zoning districts in which it was located. So if you're worried about it being non-conforming, this says that as long you can expand the residence as long as it doesn't expand the non-conformance.
I'm not sure that tells the whole story though. But
I mean, that's one thing that deals with non-conformity.
well, the idea of a nonconformity, but
Yeah, but this
let's get
was
to our
built in
discussion.
error, right?
Yeah.
It was, it's a different, whether it would qualify as non-conforming as opposed to, well, it's non-conforming. I don't know what else it would be considered.
technically it would be considered a violation, just flat out, and which makes it a nonconformity. But let's defer that for the moment. Do you have any other questions for the applicant?
Then the other question is, and this is more for, not of the applicant, this is more for our deliberation and discussion, and that is the ordinance section that was cited for, which is the 3671, which exempts decks that are at the floor, that at the floor level or below, and this is below the first floor level of the house, correct?
No.
That's correct.
It is.
Yes,
No.
the basement's below it. The basement's below it, but the
No, I mean
first,
the deck.
No.
It's
Yeah,
multi-level.
this is where this.
Oh, it's a multi-level deck.
I'm
Yes.
sorry.
I did not remember that. Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, well.
So it's the upper level of the deck actually that is an issue,
Yes.
not the lower level of the deck.
Can I move that we close public part of this? so that we
Well,
can
let me
deliberate?
just make sure that no one else has any questions. Jan, are we all finished?
Yeah, I just wanted to just see, so it's actually what's non-conforming is the upper level of the deck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or what's in violation.
No,
is the upper
I
level
looked
of
at
the
the
deck.
same section you're referring to.
Yeah, so it's the
it-
upper level
Yeah.
of, that's the violation. So with that, I guess I would like to, if it's not the lower portion of the deck, would you answer the same way about reducing the violation on the upper portion, of the deck? It's,
Let's discuss that in our deliberations.
well, I was gonna
Because
ask
I think it's
that
important, well, if you have questions. then-
of the applicant, if they were talking, because everyone was talking about the concrete supports and so forth, as opposed to the upper level of the deck.
No, well, at this point, let's,
No, that's fine.
let's do this before I forget. I'd like to have a disclosure of who has been to the site to do an inspection and whether there was any discussions with the applicant. Jerry?
I was
Patrick?
there, but I did not talk to the applicant.
All right, Mr. Walsh?
Visited the site, did not talk to the applicant.
Ms. Culbertson?
I visited the site and did not.
I visited the site also some time ago when it first came up and had a discussion with Mr. Bears only to arrange to let him know I'm coming over and ask permission to walk on the property and take a look at it because I had some questions about the same things that Ms. Culbertson had. But my discussions were nothing beyond that. Is that correct, Mr. Bears?
That's totally correct. I remember the call.
All right.
Entertain a motion.
Yes.
I move that we close the public hearing part of this petition.
Motion by Mr. Walsh to close the public hearing, seconded by Mr. Shield. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion passes. Public hearing is Oh, you know what? We're jumping the gun a little bit. Is there anybody in the audience on Zoom who would like to speak on this issue? Raise your hand. Anybody raising the hand?
Yes, Jonathan Greenberg.
Okay.
So if you'll unmute yourself, go ahead.
Yes, the folks here for public comment are not an audience. We're the public. And the term audience applies to rulers and entertainers. And neither one of those things are happening here. So I appreciate it if you'd refer to us as the public and not the audience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, then
I don't
let's,
see any other hands raised.
all right, then the public hearing will now be closed at 7:44. Well, there are certain things here that I think are uncontroverted. And should be included in the deliberations. Number one, the applicant is faultless. The owners, these owners are completely faultless, have done nothing wrong, and were put in this position because looking at some other work they intended to do, they discovered that there was a problem. And we have zoning compliance of this structure back in 2005. I've been completely unable to really delve into it to get all the facts straight as to who did it, why it did, and what the mistake was. But there also was zoning compliance. So somebody along the line in this chain of events made a mistake. And it may, and I'm speculating at this point, maybe sometimes these things might happen with a stake being put in the wrong place or a stake being put in the right place and then moved by mistake. And, you know, it just goes on and on from there. Whether it was the actual construction of the house that caused this problem, I don't know. But certainly the deck, when it went in, encroached 4 feet, but that was only discovered very recently. So we have a rather unusual problem, in my opinion, that makes this case extraordinary and exceptional by virtue of the fact that the present owners did nothing wrong. There was zoning compliance. Everything should have been the right way, but now we found out it wasn't. And although I disagree with the applicant that 4 feet encroachment into a setback is minor, I really don't, I can't buy into that personally. It depends on the circumstances, but 4 feet is 4 feet into a setback. And the option here really is not good because the owner's only option to make this compliant is to get a zoning variance as requested, or it's got to be taken down. And when I did go out there and look at that, and this goes to Ms. Culberson's questions, it can be done. You could remove it. I think you'd have to remove a huge, well,
My opinion is you'd have to remove the upper deck.
yes, you'd have to remove that. Yeah, the stuff at ground level is not an issue. And I don't think it's an issue in my mind. Mm-hmm. So, although it could be done, it's really lot of work and expense, and it really would affect what I think would be a substantial property right of people in that area having a deck attached to the house. I think we can safely say that occurs throughout the township, not only in that particular area. So my take on the matter is that there are exceptional circumstances which make this highly unusual, and take it out of the situation where we begin to consider other properties with the same problems in the same general area. I don't think we're seeing that. I think this is completely unusual. And I think that the variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of a substantial property right in having a deck. And otherwise, the other required considerations for a variance, in my opinion, are not an issue. Certainly, if the exceptional circumstances did not result from the actions of the applicant, although you might claim that his predecessor's entitled, but I think that's a little bit on the speculation side. We don't know what happened, but we're dealing with the situation as it presents itself. This is a highly unusual situation in my mind. That's my opinion. Ms. Culberson?
I mean, I would concur. I think, looking at it, my thought was the only thing you could do is take out that second floor deck. And in this case, this is someone who purchased the house. I mean, the price of the house, included that second floor deck. And I do agree about the extenuating circumstances. We haven't been able to track how it happened. It might have been multiple issues. And so I would agree that it isn't a huge encroachment, and that the remedies are pretty drastic and not the fault of.
You bring up another thing too, by implication at least. The only other way of resolving this matter after taking out the offending area of the deck is then a lawsuit. And all of a sudden, a problem becomes very much more substantial and falls into the category of full employment for lawyers.
Is that a bad thing?
It's not when I was practicing.
So
You gentlemen,
I've been struggling with exactly the same issue for a couple of months now, and the thing that I worried most about was the fact that it was his predecessor's entitled. And I think we've done a good job of working around that in a way that I'm comfortable saying that that is not relevant in this case, given the other facts.
Mr. Kangas, any thoughts on the matter?
No, I just concur very much with what you stated very, very well in terms of the situation.
Mr. Walsh, what do you think?
I'll be a little more blunt than you, Mr. Chair.
Being blunt is not one of my qualities. Oh, wait a minute.
Not me.
No, wait a minute. It's not. Never mind.
I guess my first thought when I saw this in November is, why are they actually here? This isn't the only house dwelling in Scio Township where someone built in a non-conforming manner. We've seen one last year on a different item. And had the applicant made any changes that didn't violate any of the zoning ordinances and not brought this forward, we'd be none the wiser. So thank you for your honesty. To then have someone bring forward something and then say, no, we have to remedy this would be more than severe in my judgment. The reason I asked about any future plans was I'm okay, given the circumstances, with giving a variance for the maintenance and repair of the existing structure. I'm not necessarily willing to allow that footprint to be used for other things. But it sounded like all they were looking for was the okay for as is. And in that case, given their honesty, given the fact that it was done prior to their purchase, I don't, with a couple of stipulations, I don't have a problem with this.
What stipulations?
Just for the repair and maintenance of the existing non-conforming part of the structure.
Well,
I don't want the deck to come down and something else elaborate put in. This isn't a carte blanche that you can move into the setback and do what you want. This is the structure that's there is there. That's not your fault. You have a right to maintain it and keep it up to preserve the value of your house. But
well,
we're not giving a carte blanche.
yeah, no, your point's well taken, but I think that if, in fact, judging from the comments of everyone of a expected granting of a variance, I think the granting of the variance alone would, because the variance is requesting only a 4-foot for the deck. The applicant is requesting a variance to allow an existing deck 36 feet from the property line rather than require 40 feet. That is it. No, are you saying?
No, that if we want to go with that interpretation, I'm fine with that. If the variance is specific to the deck, the existing deck, then I'm okay with it. I just wanted to be forthright of this isn't
Yeah,
a 4-foot.
that's the way I would read it.
Okay.
Does everyone appreciate the distinction that Mr. Wallace is making here? We want to, it seems we want to restrict this to just the existing deck. But I think that's what's being requested here anyway, from the wording of the request. Otherwise, you could make it conditional, but then we start talking about language to do that. I'll leave it up to you. If you.
The minutes will capture if someone needs to go back.
Okay.
The wording in the variances for the deck. I think it's pretty straightforward.
Does everyone agree with that? That this would only, the variance if granted would only apply to the existing deck? That's everyone's agreement? Okay. Well, then I'll entertain a motion, I guess.
Fine, I'll give it a whirl.
Okay. Mr. Wallace, go ahead.
In the matter of variance number 22005, bears rear yard deck setback variance at 4700 Stonehill Lane for a 36-foot rear yard setback rather than the required 40-foot rear yard setback in accordance with section 36-71B. The requested variance should be granted due to the following findings of fact. There are exceptional circumstances or conditions to the property that do not apply generally to the other property classes of use in this district. The exceptional circumstances are that the homeowner purchased the house with the deck already existing in a non-conforming manner, and that this was previously approved in a zoning matter dating back to 2005, but we cannot find the actual details as a board on that. 2, the variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of a substantial property right possessed by the property in the same zone and vicinity. I think we agree that the deck is a property right in that zone. The granting of such variance or modification will not be material detrimental to the public welfare or materially injurious to the property or improvements in such zone or district in which the property is located. The granting of such variance will not adversely affect the purpose or objectives of the master plan of the township. And again, absent exceptional circumstances which would otherwise result in substantial injustice, the circumstances or conditions upon which the variance is based do not result from the actions of the applicant, but may be on his predecessors. But at this point, it would be exceptional to penalize the applicant for property he bought and the condition he bought it in. Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Walsh to approve the requested variance supported by Mr. Kangas.
Go for it, Mr. Chair.
I would just ask for a slight amendment to your motion to reflect that, number one, although the fault might theoretically be attributable to a predecessor in title, we have no proof of that, and we're speculating on it.
Great.
I guess that's it. Is that approved by
Yes.
you? Mr. Kangas, you seconded it. Would you approve the amendment as well? Okay. We have a motion to approve the request for a variance. So we'll have Mr. Walsh call the roll.
Oath,
Yes.
Culbertson,
Yes.
Walsh, yes. Shields,
Yes.
Kangas.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes 5-0. I have signed an approval or I've signed a granting of the variance.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah?
I just want to clarify for the record that that what makes this case exceptional is the house and the deck went through a permitting process and a zoning and was granted the certificate of occupancy and the zoning compliance signed off on. So it isn't a case where someone didn't permit something and is coming back, coming to ask for a variance to have it
Well,
approved.
yeah, and I agree. I agree that that's part and parcel of the motion and that we have established that in our discussions.
Yes.
I don't think it's necessary to in any way change the motion.
No, not at all. I just wanted to make that kind of clarifying comment because I think that there are cases where people have not permitted things and become
Sure.
variance.
I agree. I have signed the notice of the approval or the granting of the request for variance without conditions, and I dated it today's date. Unfortunately, Mr. Bears, you're not here to present this to. I will ask the secretary, who's in charge of all correspondence, to send a copy of this to Mr. Bears.
Yep.
Well, actually,
I'll
to
scan
Mr. and Mrs. Bears.
Yep. And Mr. Miller, since
And
he's on
then
this.
I'm gonna give you 2 more copies, to go to the township. If you could make sure that Fran gets them.
Yes.
She's aware of the procedure, so, if we can go in that regard. All right, Mr. Barris, you're all set. Thank you very much. and Good luck.
Thanks to all of you. We appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, before we go on.
Yes.
Township ones, may I check the without conditions box?
Yes, I thought I did. I must have missed that one. Make sure they're checked without conditions.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda under old business. Variance number 22006, James and Shauna Walter for 1096 Coventry Square Drive, H-08-14-440-136 to allow a covered deck with a 40-foot rear yard setback rather than the required 50-foot rear yard setback pursuant to section 36-75. Are you James and Shauna Walter?
Yes.
Why don't you come on up here to the table here so you can speak to us. You got a microphone right over your head there, so it'll work out fine. You've heard my summary of how the procedure works here with the Zoning Board of Appeals. Why don't you go ahead and make your presentation, and we'll go from there.
Stop this one. Should we read the email from?
Oh, yes, thank you for reminding me. Let me just read this email because I'm sure you haven't seen this one yet. It's very brief. It's just a very brief summary. This is the email from Ms. Krebs dated today. Walter, 1096 Coventry Square. The applicant is seeking a variance for the required rear yard setback along the east, parentheses rear, and property line in order to construct a covered deck on the back of their existing house. The subject property is zoned R1, which requires a 50-foot rear yard setback. Uncovered decks may encroach 10 feet into the rear yard setback in accordance with section 36-71. However, the portion of the deck which occupies the required rear yard shall not contain any enclosed or covered structures. So, please, go ahead.
So I have a couple things that we had discovered as we went through this process was to start out with, our house is non-conforming from when it was built. It actually turns out that the back corner of the garage actually appears to be to encroach by about 15 feet and therefore has about a 35-foot setback from the rear yard. I don't actually have the original site plan, but it looks like the house was rotated when it was constructed, which led to that particular corner of the garage encroaching in that area. The covered porch that we're actually requesting is not even going back as far as the back corner of the garage. So the house that's on the north of us likely would not even be able to see it.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
I did come and research that with the zoning administrator here at the township. We went through every piece of paperwork on our subdivision. We went through every piece of paperwork on our property itself. And it looks like what happened was the builder, when he first submitted for the property itself, submitted something different than what was actually built, and that a site inspection wasn't done. And so that's he went back and looked at who was supposed to do the site inspection. And he said, it appears that a site inspection most likely just never occurred. And
What
so
year- What year are we talking?
1980, late 80s.
late eighties, like 85, 86, something like that. And he said, it looks like he said, my best guess is that he just didn't come out and inspect the property. Cause if a site inspection had occurred, it would have been caught that this doesn't match the picture. And, it's built into the setback already. Your house is built into the setback. It's built into the setback already. And so anything you put back there is going to be, you're gonna have a problem. So.
When did you folks purchase the house?
2016,
Yeah, and it was never
I'm sorry.
2016.
2016. And it was never disclosed, one, it was never disclosed to us what the setbacks were, and it was never disclosed to us that we were already in the setback.
Okay. Go ahead. And this was, the person who told you this was Mr. Luan? Or who?
She went through this with Doug in zoning.
Doug Luan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay. So essentially what we would like to be able to do is end up building a covered deck off the back of the house. Being able to have a covered deck with a fixed roof, it gives us kind of the ability, gives protection from the sun when we're out enjoying the weather, allows us to put a ceiling fan on there, which is something we fully intend on doing. As well as bringing lighting out away from the house a little bit, which also actually helps with the bugs and insects around the doors and stuff. But in addition to all of this, it's also worth noting that the property that's directly behind us is actually parkland that's owned by Scio Hill Subdivision. And Scio Hill Subdivision has already approved what we presented to them that we would like to construct for a deck with that covered roof.
You're referring to a homeowners association?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay. So I guess that's
protected parkland is on two sides of us, actually.
yeah, it's actually to the south and to the east of us. I don't know exactly how many feet is between us and the property behind us, but it's actually a pretty good amount of parkland that's there, and it's intended for use by anyone basically in that subdivision. When they review, or I think it was when I guess Carlisle, when they did their variance considerations, I mean, they noted that, well, yeah, we could build a deck, going 10 feet into that setback. But, this is our second home that we've owned. The first one, we took the approach of doing a retractable awning. Okay, we've went that approach before. We didn't like it. It worked, to some degree, but it does not provide the kind of function that having a fixed roof over the deck ends up providing. And I think the other thing that's actually worth, mentioning here too is that, with Scio Township's current R1 zoning for 1 acre lot, I don't know if you guys have actually, considered this or not, but 55% of our property, actually more than 55% of our property is set back. Property that we can't really do anything with without coming here to get an approval to build on. And I think that, it's something worth keeping in mind when we're considering, what we can and can't do on a 1 acre lot.
For me in particular, having a covered deck is in particular extremely important because of medical problems I have. I do actually need to be kept out of the sun. So that's another reason why having a covered deck is important. And that's why we had a retractable awning on our last house. So, I do have pretty extreme, reactions to the sun. So.
Out of curiosity, where was the house supposed to be built?
From the original site plan, it looked like it was,
You have the original site plan with you?
I do not have the original site plan with me. That was the one document that I do not have.
It was supposed to be turned though.
But it actually looks like it was supposed to be more parallel with the road. It's pretty similar position in terms of where it's sitting now, at least in terms of the kind of that southwest corner. Well, my suspicion is that our house is kind of on the highest part of our lot right now. And they may have very well oriented the house in order to maximize drainage away from the house.
Well, because our house was also the only house in the subdivision that we found out the hard way, had a French drain put in it. And so a couple of years after moving in, that French drain backed up. And so we've had to, I don't know if any of you visited it, but there's a strip out of our driveway because we had to dig that drain out. Because the
Fresh drain was right underneath the driveway.
it was right underneath the driveway. In the front,
A spring or?
A drain.
a drain, it had, yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with the French drain, what else do they call
They
them?
just kind of run a tile out in the yard and then they have,
Culvert usually.
Yeah, it drained out to that woodlands between us and one of the neighbors. And yeah, our house was like, it was the only one that had that in the subdivision, because our understanding was the first one built in the subdivision. So I think they were trying to build it on the highest part.
Well, if it was. Okay, let me do this before we maybe get some questions here. I did visit the property twice. Once when it was up last time, once just the other day, to reacquaint myself. So I have seen it. And I understand what you would desire to do, but I had no conversations with the applicant. Mr. Walsh, how about you?
I was out when this came up in December. I did not have a conversation with either of you, and I did not go back since.
Okay. Mr. Kangas? No visit? Okay.
Seen
Mr.
it twice,
Shields?
but no conversations.
Okay. Ms. Culbertson?
I visited once with the original application.
Any discussions
No
with the applicant?
discussions.
Okay. Well, are there any questions? Mr. Walsh, do you have any questions of the applicant?
No, the question I was going to ask was about alternatives. You've covered that. I'm sure if you've thought of retractable, you've also thought of the sails that you can put up. I was just trying to think, I mean, for me, it's not the deck. The deck, I think, is easy. It's the covered part that we've got to get around. And I guess medical condition is one exceptional thing, but I'm looking, we as a group need reasons to grant the variance. And that's really what I'm trying to get my head around.
Ms. Culbertson, any questions?
No questions. Thank you. You covered, I think, your reasons and the history. Well, thank you.
Mr. Shields?
Sort of taking off of Mr. Walsh's comment. We're supposed to answer these questions in a particular way, and I understand the health issue, but I'm not sure what the substantial property right that you're being deprived of.
I think
Struggling.
my question for you guys is, should we have to sell our house in order to be able to find a place that we can have a covered deck?
that we can fully
Well, that's-
enjoy our property.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
Well,
Because it really will come to that. I mean, I don't think we should not be able to enjoy Scio Township because we can't fully, because our intent the entire time when we first moved to this property was to build a deck. And now we find we can't build a deck because the original builder of this property built it so far back and built it so far back to a setback that, because when we first looked at this property, we were like, great, we're surrounded on three sides by woodlands that we can't even see our neighbors. And this isn't ever gonna be an issue for us. And
correct.
we're gonna be able to build a deck and we're gonna be able, because if those of you that visit the property know it has this dinky little deck on it, we can literally only fit a grill and turn around and walk inside and that's it. And it's not covered. And as I was saying to you, this poses a huge problem for me. You know, I have seizures. I have a severe allergy and that has sent me to the emergency room and I have to be protected from the sun. And we have tried things before, like doing the retractable roof, and we had issue after issue after issue with this. So we knew going in that we were gonna build a covered deck. And
So what have you been doing for the last 7 years?
he's grilled. He's done the grilling.
Right now, we don't have a deck that we can actually go out and even enjoy right now.
Correct. He's done the grilling and we've worked up to this project and so, you know, we're doing some home improvements inside right now that was leading up to the deck project because, you know, we had to deal with COVID the last couple of years. We weren't gonna do projects without permitting, which, as you know, a lot of people have been doing. And so we said, you know, we'll just sideline it. And then we go to pull the paperwork and we're like, you've got to be kidding me. So then everything just was, we literally have everything setting in our garage, waiting to go. And now we're just at a standstill.
Mr. Kangas, do you have any questions?
No, I think the only thing which didn't come out, at least in the stuff that I read, was the health problem. And you know, when you purchased the property, you said you found out that the house itself is in the.
We didn't find out
just
when we
found
purchased
that out
property.
last-
We didn't know until we started pulling permits to do the work on the house.
Yeah.
It was never disclosed.
Mr. Chairman, I did come up with one more question.
Go ahead.
So the deck doesn't seem to be an issue because the deck can encroach. It's
Correct.
the roof.
Yep.
And did you explore, obviously you had, you know, a design that you submitted and the zoning compliance said, whoops. So have you gone back to look at, because you do have an area of the deck that you could cover that would be a change to the original design? And I was wondering if you had pursued other design options to cover another portion of the deck as opposed to the one that would encroach.
So the problem with that is that, or part of the problem with that is that with where this bump out is going, it's being integrated into the kitchen area. And the whole intent, and part of the intent is that we can actually integrate this part of the deck with the kitchen. You know, we're able to cook out there, entertain out there, be able to enjoy
I think
the
it throws
outdoors
off the
there.
pitch of the roof, doesn't it?
And that would be the other issue is the pitch of the roof. That with where we have it, So where the roof line was gonna be coming into is where it's 2-story. And so there wasn't an issue with getting the roof line up high enough to accommodate the deck. Moving it anywhere towards the south, it actually starts bringing it into where it's only a single story.
It wasn't necessarily just, it wasn't like we necessarily just arbitrarily picked like where we're gonna put the deck. It's, you have to, because it's a 2-story deck, you have
It's
to, it's a
2-story home.
2-story home, you have to get the right pitch to blend it into where the current roof line is over the existing roof line.
I don't know if the one picture actually shows it very well or not,
I
but
don't know.
yeah. So I was kind of on this one here, right? It's like, once you start going over to where the current deck is, that's only a single story part of the house over there. And so you really can't put a roof over that part of it. And they already took the existing deck that was over there and built a 4-season room.
So there's already been an expansion one?
Yeah, the 4-season room was added.
Yeah, 4-season room was actually built on top of an existing deck. But that actually does not appear to encroach it there anyway. But that was actually long before us.
Any other questions? Mr. Shields, Mr. Kangas? All right, entertain a motion to close. Well, let me not make the same mistake. Is there any other persons who would like to support this application? Please, there's nobody in the room, so is there anybody else? Raise your hand so we can tell. Are there anybody in the audience? I'm not supposed to say that. Is there anybody here who would care to speak against it? Please raise your hand.
I see no one on Zoom raising their hand.
Okay. Then I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Wall, seconded by Mr. Shields to close the public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay. Well, it's a small lot, which is, and the buildings are currently non-conforming. There's already been one addition to this after it was built. And even if the house was rotated, it looks to me like it would still be pretty close, if not, in fact, beyond the setback. The applicant, it does have the ability to build the deck without a roof. Although it is a small piece of property, and the applicant seems to suggest that's a reason that they're at a disadvantage. In my mind, it's a small piece of property, and therefore it's limited in what can be done. But I'll listen for anybody else.
I think that, they can build the deck, as you said. There are other options for shade. I don't think it's a substantial property, right? They already have a 4-season room. The house has been expanded. I just don't see exceptional circumstances here.
Anybody else? Mr. Shields?
I agree, and the thing I would be worried about is setting, when they move, it still have provided variance. And if you approve it because of medical condition, that doesn't make sense. For the township as a whole and our variances.
Mr. Walsh?
I'd like to say yes. I'm not at a point where I've got anything that compels me. I drove the neighborhood. I looked for other houses that had covered decks to see if we could use that as a leverage, saying, all right, other houses in the neighborhood had covered decks. They were being denied based on the location of their house, the size of their lot, or something else. I didn't see covered decks. We've been fairly consistent as a group on setbacks, what is or isn't allowed, regardless of whether there's property right behind there or a public area. We've kept the setback pretty rigid. I understand the medical reason. I need more.
Mr. Kangas, any thoughts?
I guess I still got a problem with the house being in the setback.
It is.
Well, a lot of houses are put in the back.
And per the zoning ordinance, they can expand it, you can't, make it, it has to conform to the current zoning ordinance. So it doesn't prohibit them from expanding it because it's in the setback. They cannot, you're prohibited from, expanding it, not conforming, to the current setbacks.
Anybody else have anything they'd like to discuss? I'll wait. I'll solicit a motion of
Is there a rebuttal period?
the public hearing has been closed. If there's something very, very important, I'm willing to allow that briefly.
I was just struck by the fact that our neighbors are fully in support of this.
Okay, we appreciate that. Thank you.
I,
All right, I'm
There is-
sorry.
There is one more thing, because you mentioned that, well, it can be that the house could be expanded as long as it conforms to the setbacks. But the thing that you have to remember is we have septic fields that we have to work around.
Okay, thank you. That could have been brought up before, but I think we're beyond that at this point. Unless there's any other thoughts from any of the commissioners, let's solicit a motion. Mr. Shields, go ahead.
In the matter of variance number 22006, Walter rear yard setback variance, 1096 Coventry Square, for a 10-foot reduction, allowing a 40-foot rear yard setback rather than required 50-foot rear yard setback. The requested variance should not be granted. There are exceptional circumstances or conditions applicable to the property that do not generally apply to other properties or classes of use in the district. The property is generally smaller, 1 acre versus 1.4 acres, than the size of lots in the subdivision. The portion of the residence was constructed within the required rear yard setback, and there was no inspection. The existing structure was constructed within the 50-foot setback, making a rear addition with a covered deck to the residence impossible. The variance is not necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of the substantial property right possessed by the property in the same zone and vicinity. The applicant has other options. In addition, a 6-foot by 24-foot covered deck is not a substantial property right. The applicant has not provided evidence of a loss of preservation and enjoyment of substantial property possessed by other properties in the same zone. That granting of such a variance or modification will not be materially detrimental to the public welfare or materially injurious to the property or improvements in such zone or district in which the property is located. The requested variance will not be detrimental to the public welfare or materially injurious to the property or improvements. The granting of such variance will not adversely affect the purpose or objectives of the master plan of the township. Absent exceptional circumstances which would otherwise result in a substantial injustice, the circumstances or conditions upon which the variance is based do result from the actions of the applicant or their predecessor in title. There were exceptional circumstances in this parcel. The proposed deck with its dimensions do not fit the township's setback ordinances. The variance requested is due to the predecessors in title and to the desire of the applicants, and is so a self-inflicted hardship.
I have just a question about the lot being smaller than the majority of the lots in the subdivision. I don't know if that's been substantiated. They
I don't
vary.
know if it's proper to get to the merits of it just yet,
Okay.
because we
I'm sorry.
just had a
Because
motion.
we need a second.
Yeah.
Sorry, I jumped
I'm sorry.
I jumped ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second, all right, there's a motion made by Mr. Shields to deny the variance, seconded by Mr. Walsh. Now, you want to bring up a couple of points, or at least one, I have a couple. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I just had there was in the motion, it talks about the exceptional circumstances of the lot being smaller than other lots. And I don't think that was, substantiated. And when you look at the map, there's a range of lot sizes, but it's one of the smaller ones, but there are other ones in that subdivision, and it's certainly larger than the minimum lot size.
Well, I'll go further than that. I'll say this, I would support your motion, Mr. Shields, but I'm very disagreed with that particular point. I think that the smaller the lot size means the less you're going to be able to do to it. And that's kind of the end of the story.
So can I pull this from the Carlisle Woolman report?
Okay.
It's generally smaller.
Generally.
Well, it may be generally smaller, but my opinion is that the smaller the size actually simply restricts what's able to be done. And so I don't think there's exceptional circumstances. Despite that, I'll support your motion to deny the variance. I disagree with that part of it as a reasoning behind it. Any other discussion of the motion?
So would we want to offer an amendment to that motion? And
I
or
don't, well, as I said, I'd support it, but I don't, it's really up to Mr. Shields, I guess, if he wants to.
I think we can drop that. They still have,
Well, you're making the motion, so if you want to amend your motion, you're going to have to say so.
okay, I'd like to amend the motion.
Okay,
Drop the first sentence under 1. The property is generally smaller, 1 acre versus 1.4 than the size of the lots in the subdivision, which should remain as a portion of the residence was constructed within the required rear yard setback. There was no inspection. Existing structure was constructed within the 50-foot setback, making a rear addition with a covered deck to the residence impossible.
One change, there's no believed inspection.
Yeah,
I don't think we ever confirmed that there was no inspection.
Okay,
Yeah,
you're right. Okay, I think that can also be dropped.
well, all right, that's a second amendment. That's an amendment to your amendment.
Right.
So just so I can kind of summarize what your motion currently is then, your motion is to deny the request for variance, including for the reason that there are no exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applicable to this property that do not apply generally to other properties or classes of uses in the same district. And that otherwise the variance is not necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of a substantial property right. But the granting of the variance would not be materially detrimental to the public health or public welfare, and that the granting of such a variance would not adversely affect the master plan, but that the circumstances or conditions upon which the variance is based do result from the actions of the applicant or the predecessors entitled. Is that correct?
Right.
All right. Mr. Walsh, with the restated motion, are you still willing to second? Okay. We have a motion to deny the request for the reasons stated. Any further discussion? All right, call the roll.
Hoff,
Yes.
Culbertson,
Yes.
Walsh, yes. Shields,
Yes.
Kangas.
Yes.
Okay, let the record reflect that I'm presenting a copy of a written notice of decision denying the variance to the applicant.
Thank you for your paid service to this community. I will be happy to not forward tonight this time. And
I guess my
recommend that to
final
all my
Thank you
friends and
very much.
neighbors.
The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes
own more of our property.
of December 15, 2022. The minutes, in my opinion, are, as usual, excellent. I can't find anything that needs to be changed. Does anybody else?
I did.
Mr. Shields, go ahead.
The spelling of my name. Hate to be so petty.
Oh,
But on page 3, the third line, member Shield minus the S.
No, I see it. Okay. Anything else besides that one error? Okay, I'll solicit the motion.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Wallace to approve the minutes, supported by Ms. Culberson. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any,
I wasn't there.
yeah, Mr. Kangas will, put you down as abstaining for the motion. And the motion otherwise passes. I have a copy of that denial. I didn't keep one myself. And you've got how many?
I've got 2 copies.
Okay, good. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Citizens wishing to address the zoning board of appeal on matters which are not on the public hearing portion of the agenda or seek information on any other matters. Such oral presentations shall be limited to 3 minutes, except a representative or spokesperson of an organization shall have 5 minutes to address the board. Is there anyone wishing to address the zoning board of appeals? Raise your hand.
Yeah, we do have 2 people
Okay.
on Zoom.
All right.
We'll wait just a second to see if we have any hands raised.
Any hands raised?
No hands are raised.
Okay, and there's no one present in the room. So we'll close the public comment. The next item of business is the report of the Planning Commission liaison. The chair calls upon Ms. Culbertson.
Thank you very much. The Planning Commission it has continued to work on the PUD ordinance. It will have to come before a public hearing. The other item is the Environmental Sustainability Task Force is hoping to have a presentation of their plan. The last, I think it's the 27th or it's the last Monday in February to present that to the Planning Commission if anyone's interested in attending that presentation. Those are the basic kind of zoning items. We do have the next meeting does have a PUD rezoning for an amendment to the PUD for Woodbridge Theater. And
What's the plan for that?
nothing specific. They've had trouble in order to market that. They want to come to an agreement, and it's a change in the PUD for a variety of uses. So what they're trying to do is restrict, come up with several uses that and amend the PUD for those uses at this point. It would, and so it'll be interesting to see it, that'll be an interesting discussion. And then there is another rezoning to allow for storage in one of the storage use in one of the Menards outlots. So both of those are zoning related.
You mean storage like their lumber?
Like self-storage, no, a self-storage kind of, yeah. And somebody must have done a very big market study in Scio Township because there's been a lot of inquiries about self-storage. So that's sort of what's up with Planning Commission.
Okay, interesting. Well, then the next item on the agenda is the draft change to the ZBA rules of procedure, and grab that. It's under the other section, the other tab in your binders. Mr. Walsh and I discussed this a little bit, and it's intended to address the issue presented by the Barris variance when it came up the first time, and no one was here, and we wound up dismissing it because for no progress, because that's what the rules basically said. And that sort of, kind of didn't make really good sense. So the redraft is basically to say that you get one free postponement to the next scheduled hearing if you don't show up. And then if you don't show up again, you're subject to a motion to dismiss for failure to prosecute. That's the only change that we're proposing to make here. And although it's not the world's most perfect wording, that's the intent of it. I'll take blame for it, but that's why I wanted to hear that lawyer on the record.
A question, Mr. Chairman. Does that mean, if it's postponed, is there a re-notification or are we, should we, I mean, just, I'm thinking procedure-wise, should we open the public hearing and then also postpone the public hearing? Because there might be people, or not at all, because I'm worried about the notification, obviously.
Yeah, well, if we take the example of the Walter situation here, we postponed it because we gave them the opportunity to do so. And the public hearing did not take place. So I guess I don't know the answer to that. And it is slightly confusing. Maybe we should wait until we get Laura back here in person so we can ask her specifically.
Because I think we should say, yeah, because I would like to know, one, if we have to we have to renotice, because then we're also,
Then there's costs.
there's costs that were,
Yeah, I think the last time we did this, Laura indicated that we could do this and there would not have to be republishing. But why don't we hold the discussion of this and put it over to the next meeting, and we can ask Laura that first.
yeah, because
How's that sound?
yeah, I would think in the procedure that it should be clear what
Yeah,
the
you're
process
right.
should be.
Yeah, and there really isn't, because I was thinking as you were asking the question, I'm trying, I mean, it's not in any materials I have, so I don't really know what the criteria is for republishing and you know, the expense involved in that. I don't know. So maybe we should find out.
Because there's certainly, and sometimes I
Well-
remember Laura did mention that sometimes you have the option to, if there's already going to be a hearing, because obviously there's the cost of the commissioners too. And so if there isn't any
Well,
other
that part of it, I think, is covered because the intent is to go to the next meeting. And there wouldn't be a meeting unless there's the next scheduled meeting. So that there wouldn't be a meeting scheduled unless there's something that
And we
came up.
might want to be clear about that
We can do
too,
that too,
so
probably.
if someone doesn't just think that it'd be the next month automatically.
Yeah,
I'm just thinking about miscommunication.
okay, well, let's keep that in our binders for right now and put it on the agenda for more discussion. We'll go from
And
there.
thank you for taking that on, because that
That was nothing much. to
it seemed brutal.
Oh, that, yeah, well,
You did
that's
a really nice
because,
job handling that.
well, I mean, well, I think we had to, so. Okay, the next item is election of officers. Every January, scheduled meeting, we elect chairman, chairperson, vice chairperson, and secretary. Ms. Culbertson is not eligible because she sits on the planning commission as a board member, well, as a chairperson. So under our rules, she cannot be chair, vice chair, or secretary.
She can be IT specialist.
Well, that's, you know,
Actually, I wouldn't call it, I would add a different.
I'm gonna make,
descriptor
you
in
know,
that.
I'm sorry.
I
this-
realized the bar's
No,
really
no,
low.
Tom, don't go there. I was joking. I shouldn't have brought it up. It's
Well,
an open
no.
wound.
It is an open wound.
Or it's salt, vinegar, and all sorts of other things just in it. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway, we have the election of officers. I don't have to be chairperson, so if somebody else wants to do it. I did talk to Diana Ramey because I knew she wasn't gonna be here and asked her whether she would object to us electing her as vice chair again. She said she had no problem. She would continue.
I think the officers at the moment are working fairly well. I put a motion out that we keep the current officers.
Support.
All right, moved by Mr. Walsh, supported by Mr. Kangas to reelect the existing officers. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. We're
Thank you,
back
Tom.
on for another year.
Thanks to the three of you.
Yes, thank you very much.
This
I have
committee
nothing-
runs very well.
I have nothing else, so I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Kangas, supported by Mr. Shields to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion carries. We're adjourned at